Hello students, welcome to another virtual session for History Class 7. Today we will cover Chapter 1, the Medieval Period. If you are still facing any issues in the audio, you can always turn on the CC button right below that will enable the subtitles to the video. So let's get started with the chapter, the Medieval Period. This chapter will contain the time period of the medieval history, the major political development in the age, importance of geographical maps and names of the places in the medieval period, names of the medieval scholars who came to India in this age, medieval documents and languages used, and the last one, the social, political, and religious groups which rose in this period. As we know, the history of the world and India is divided into three broad periods, namely ancient, medieval, and modern. The medieval period. The medieval period in India spans over a millennium, that is 1000 years, from 18th century Common Era to 18th century Common Era. But in Europe, medieval period began in the 5th century Common Era. There are two phases of medieval period in India. The early medieval period starting from 8th century to 13th century Common Era, and the later medieval period starting from 13th century Common Era to 18th century Common Era. Now let's look into early medieval period. The early medieval period saw political struggle among regional kingdom of both north and south. The Rajputs in the north and the Cholas in the south were the prominent kingdoms. The distinctive cultural characteristics of the regional kingdoms spread in new regions that came under them. Now, let us see what happened in the later medieval period. Muslim conquerors from Central Asia, especially the Turks, the Afghans, and the Mughals, ruled India. The Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, and the Mughals established mighty dynasties. Islamic customs influenced political, economical, social, and cultural life in India, and our Indo-Islamic culture grew in a big way. Now, let us understand what is cartography and what is a cartographer. Cartography is the art or skill of drawing and making maps, and the person who makes these maps is referred to as a cartographer. Cartography and the medieval India. Cartography or map making was unknown in ancient India. The Arabs and the Europeans, who took long journeys over land and sea, had developed cartography. Hence, it was introduced to Indians by the Arabs and the Europeans. The European traders. Towards the end of the 15th century, Europeans began direct trade with Indian seaports. The Portuguese came first, followed by the English, the Dutch, and the French. By the mid 18th century, the British had defeated the French, and so they became the dominant force in India. And this event is marked as the beginning of the modern age in India. Many foreigners settled in coastal cities and near the northwestern borders, and these foreigners also brought with them their culture, custom, religion, crafts, and even some fruits and vegetables. Sericulture, that is the production of silk from rearing of silkworms, came from China, and the Persian wheel from Persia. Turks bought plums, peaches, oranges, and lemons. Likewise, Portuguese bought potatoes, tomatoes, and chilies. Medieval maps of India. Most medieval maps of India were drawn by sailors who were more familiar with the coastal regions. Hence, these maps show the coastal areas in more detail rather than the interior regions. Now, let's have a look at some of the medieval scholars who visited India. Al-Biruni, a famous Central Asian scholar, came to India And he also mastered Sanskrit. He translated some Sanskrit text into Arabic. And he also wrote a book called Kitab al-Hind on India. Ibn Battuta came to India from Tangier, which is a part of modern day Morocco, North Africa, in the 14th century. His work, Rihla, describes his travels in India. Their writings gives us valuable geographical information on medieval India. Al-Idrisi and his upside down map. Al-Idrisi was a 12th century cartographer from Morocco. His upside down map, that means the map has south shown at the top. It shows Arabia at the center and India to its left. Above India is an island which could be Sri Lanka. Below Arabia is Turkey and further down is Europe. But at the end of the medieval period, cartography became more accurate. The growth of new languages. Most scholars and officials all over India wrote either in Sanskrit or in Persian. But in the regional kingdoms, the regional languages were widely being used. Like Telangani was used in Telangana, Kashmiri in Kashmir, Awadh, which is a dialect of Hindi, in Uttar Pradesh, Gujri in Gujarat, and Gauri in Bengal. Many literary works were being composed in these languages, and they provide valuable historical information. Let us now understand the nature of the medieval documents. Medieval records of land revenue, land grants, works of religious literature, and secular works such as travel writing, history, and science are preserved till date. Let us now see what are the sources for studying medieval Indian history. There are archaeological sources such as temples, mosques, tombs, coins, palaces, forts, etc. And then there are literary sources, biographies, autobiographies, travel blogs, farmans, that are the royal commands. Moving on to places names. Medieval maps and writings of medieval authors provide valuable information about the geographical features and the names of the places in those times. But the names of the places mentioned in those documents and maps have changed over time. Historians have to find out present names and match it with the old names. And that is all for today's session. Please check the next video for the remaining topics of this chapter. Until then, bye bye. Take care.